Would you rather be than a Zoom full of Penn Staters? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's virtual speaker session titled Everybody Dance Now. Live closed captions are available. You can access them by clicking the closed caption link at the bottom of the Zoom video window and then clicking Show Subtitles. You may also customize your caption view by clicking the Stream to Text link posted in the chat. And we are live streaming today's presentation, which will be archived and available on our website. Today's guest, Penn State professor of dance, Michele Dunleavy, is an award-winning educator, choreographer, and performer. Notably, Professor Dunleavy is also the 2024-25 Penn State Laureate. She joined the School of Theater in 2004 as a member of the highly acclaimed musical theater program, where she teaches tap and jazz techniques and contributes original choreography for Penn State Centre Stage. Professor Dunleavy will discuss her experience leading Let's Dance and an all ages, all abilities community dance workshop sponsored by Penn State Center for the Performing Arts. She will also touch on her current collaboration with distinguished professor in communication science and disorders, Krista Wilkinson. More information about today's guest is available in the chat. Thanks for joining us, Professor Dunleavy. We'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak to the Alumni Association today. Thank you to James, who's here somewhere, for all his assistance in getting everything organized. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll get started. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so as you already know, my name is Michele Dunleavy. I'm a professor of dance here at Penn State. I've been here for 20 years now, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the work that I've been doing in access and inclusion in dance. So I am a dancer, a choreographer, and an educator. And I have been working with the Center for the Performing Arts, leading a all ages, all abilities family movement workshop, or a community movement workshop called Let's Dance, since 2016. And from that event, a collaboration came about in the implementation of the course CSD 240, Supporting Communication Through Performance. So how it started. How did we get here? How did I get here? So in 2016, I was asked to lead Let's Dance, a community dance workshop sponsored by the Center for the Performing Arts. And you can see in this photo here, there is certainly all ages represented and always a variety of abilities. The folks in this photograph are participating in an exercise or an activity that I like to call negative space, but sometimes called complementary statues, where folks are making shapes with their bodies in relationship to others in the group. So Let's Dance, what does it look like? It is a family-friendly, all ages, all abilities community dance workshop. Our community partner for Let's Dance is the For Good Troupe. The For Good Troupe is a State College-based performing arts ensemble that prioritizes the experience of individuals with Down syndrome. You'll recognize them in the photos that I'm going to share from their bright green shirts. So these are some photos from our most recent Let's Dance event. We do one annually. We are on stage at the Eisenhower Auditorium in these photographs, and you can see some of our troupe members in the green shirts on your left, and also down on the bottom right. And also, again, you can see the wide range of ages that are represented in the other photos of our participants. So what does Let's Dance look like? Well, we start with a performance by the For Good Troupe. That is followed by improvisation activities, and they might take the form of icebreakers, large and small group activities, or partner activities. And then after that, we learn and execute some basic choreography together. So we learn some movement and then we all dance together as a group. So here's a photograph of the For Good Troupe in performance. This is probably the 2016 Let's Dance that got this all started. We are outdoors in front of the Ford building on campus. As you can see from this photograph, our performers are very invested in the work that they do. And this is a photograph of them performing Greased Lightning, which is one of their signature numbers and a huge fan favorite. Another photograph of the small group activities. So this is a group of individuals standing in a circle, and they're doing a call and response rhythm game. And two photographs here that show some partner activities. So the photograph on the left, two students are engaging in that negative space or complementary statues activity that I described earlier, where they're making complementary shapes in response to each other. And then a line of students and participants in the next photo standing across from each other, holding hands as part of choreography. And one more photograph of me leading some choreography in our last Let's Dance iteration, which happened in March. Again, this is on stage at Eisenhower Auditorium. So I want to talk a little bit about my collaborator, Dr. Krista Wilkinson. So Krista and I met at that Let's Dance event back in 2016 because she is the founder and the director of the For Good Troupe. She is also a distinguished professor of communication science and disorders. After the success of that Let's Dance event, she had an idea to develop a course that would build on the success of that event. And she came to me and said, would you be interested in collaborating? And I said, sure. So together we created the curriculum for CSD 240, Supporting Communication Through Performance. This course teaches specific performing arts skills, including improvisation, voice and music, and African dance and drumming as a means to support valued social and communication skills in folks with and without disabilities. And here's some photos from our most recent class that we offered last spring. On your left, there's a group of students engaging in an activity called Dance Diamond, in which one person steps forward from the group, everyone else stands behind, and they follow the movements and the dance moves of the person in the front. Again, in the top right on the opposite side of the screen, that complementary statues activity. And then below that, newer activity that we added called Family Portraits. And in this photograph, that is a portrait of the scared family, and you can tell how frightened they are by their physical actions. Another photograph from our African drumming unit, the man in the plaid shirt, all the way at the back of the circle on your right. His name is Jeff Martin, and he's the person who leads our African drumming unit. So who takes CSD 240? Well, we have students from a variety of majors, including CSD, education, special education, and theater, as well as others. We've had biology majors and sort of runs the gamut, but these are the primary constituents in our course. CSD 240 is also populated by students from LifeLink PSU. So a little bit about LifeLink for some context. LifeLink is a partnership between Penn State and the State College Area School District. And I'm going to take this is right from their website. I'm going to read it so I don't get it wrong. LifeLink provides college-age students with disabilities an opportunity to interact with students of their own age in an environment that is socially and academically conducive to continued growth. Our LifeLink students often attend class with a peer mentor from the Penn State community, which expands our classroom community with a whole other demographic. Our course structure starts with the first half of the semester being dedicated to skills building. So we begin with a unit in improvisation, followed by the units in voice and music and African dance and drumming. And each unit lasts about 2 to 3 weeks. I should also mention that we bring in experts to teach the units where we don't have expertise. So I lead the improvisation unit, but we have an expert come in to teach the voice and music unit, and then we have experts come in to teach African dance and drumming. In the second half of the semester, we use the skills that we learn in the first half to create content for our performance. Our course culminates in 2 public performances on campus. One is at Cafe Laura, and the other takes place in one of the School of Theater's performance venues. Additionally, throughout the semester, our students are reading relevant scientific literature, engaging in regular group discussions, and completing drawn and written reflections on the applications of these class activities to their everyday lives. And here's an example of what that looks like. So at the end of our improvisation unit, we pose the question, how might you or how do you use improvisation in your everyday life? And our LifeLink students tend to enjoy drawing their responses to these prompts. And in this photograph, one of our LifeLink students is sharing how on a day when we had a snow delay and our class didn't meet, he was able to improvise his daily routine. So in the drawing, you can see this is a LifeLink apartment, and there's the bed, and there's the stick person in the shower. So the student was able to improvise their daily routine because they had extra time in their morning. So why do we start with improvisation? Improvisation offers all students the opportunity to take risks in a low stakes and supportive environment. We have found that because there is no right or wrong in improvisation, students are more likely to try a new activity. And we've seen over the many years of offering the course, we began in 2017, as well as this is proven by scientific literature, that the skills these activities can support include turn taking, so call and response, sustaining eye contact or maintaining focus on another, expressing emotion, developing sensitivity to an audience, partner, or to others, imitation, learning how to imitate someone else's model, as well as initiation or being the leader. So in 2024, Krista and I realized that we were both, I wouldn't say due for sabbatical, but eligible to take sabbatical. And we decided to take our sabbaticals concurrently. So some of our goals included to visit established disability affirmative theater and dance programs around the country as a way to expand our professional networks, and also to learn new methods and applications from others in the field. So here are some of the companies and programs that we visited during that fall sabbatical. The ones that are marked with an asterisk are companies that I visited by myself without Dr. Wilkinson accompanying me. So first we went to Camp Yes and in Indianapolis, Indiana. And then I traveled to Oakland, California to work with Access Dance. We attended the Neurodiverse Play Festival sponsored by Spectrum Theater in Providence, Rhode Island. And then traveled to Sykesville, Maryland to work with Barrier Free Theater. And then I spent 5 weeks working with Family Theater in Denver, Colorado on a new production in collaboration with a dance company. So just a little bit about each of those companies or organizations. So this is a screenshot from Camp Yes and it says Improv, Autism, and Equity. Camp offers a unique combination of educator professional learning and support for neurodiverse youth to make social connections. And in the photograph in this screenshot, this is also another version of family portraits. So it's a group of people striking what looks to me, I would guess, like silly poses. So maybe this is the silly family. So the structure of Camp Yes And is, well, first, it's an improvisation camp for teens and adults. In the morning session lasted from 9 to 12, and that was for the adult professionals. And these professionals included educators like myself and Dr. Wilkinson, as well as speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, folks in the theater communities in their hometowns. And then in the afternoon session, it was the adult professionals plus neurodivergent teens from the Indianapolis community. They used a language-based model, meaning that most of the work we did was centered around emphasizing the creation of improvised scenes and developing characters using language. At Axis Dance, this is a company based in Berkeley, California. Founded in 1987, Axis is one of the nation's most acclaimed ensembles of disabled, non-disabled, deaf, and neurodiverse performers. So it is an integrated company in terms of ability. And in this screenshot from their website, you can see there are dancers in wheelchairs, dancers standing behind them. There's a wide range of ability inside of the company. And so just a little bit about what that intensive looked like. We had participants with and without disabilities attending, so very much mirroring the composition of the company itself. There was a wide range of professionals working at various levels, so folks working in higher education, performers, educators, folks working in their communities at a recreational level. And each day focused on a different element. So we had a day where we worked on improvisation, a day where we focused on yoga, choreography, and then finished the week out with teacher training. This next photo is from Spectrum Theater Ensemble's Neurodiverse Play Festival. So this is a photo I took of the final event of the festival, which was a drag story hour where they read Where the Wild Things Are. It was excellent. And this is just a little bit from their website, how they describe themselves. Founded by neurodivergent artists, Spectrum Theater Ensemble evolves the awareness, resources, and professionals that empower our neurodiverse community in achieving their greatest potential and equal opportunity and full participation in society. So this was a different event in that we didn't participate, Krista and I, in any training or activities, but we witnessed the New Play Festival. And what we saw were plays written, directed, performed, and produced by neurodivergent artists. The performances took place in non-traditional venues like nightclubs and bars. And the plays were in various stages of development. So some of them were being read for the very first time. Some of them had more robust rehearsal processes and production accompaniment. And now just a little bit about Barrier Free. So in this screenshot, you can see there is a group of folks standing in front of one of the monuments in Washington, D.C., 2 people playing guitar, a photograph from one of their performances, and then 2 thumbnails of performers in their theater companies. And it just says who we are. Barrier Free is a nonprofit disability service organization that provides inclusive art, self-advocacy, and social programming to the community for neurodivergent adults. And so their program includes 2 theater companies, one for folks who are newer to the organization or maybe have less experience with theater, and then another theater program that is for folks who have been with them for a few years or maybe enter one of their programs with a little bit more theater background. They do public performances each spring. And they also provide a wide range of year-round programming for neurodivergent individuals. And they are very, very emphasizing community connection. And last but not least is family theater, transforming stories, deconstructing barriers, and elevating disability. And in this screenshot from their website, there's a series of thumbnails that show actors from various productions, and some folks are in wheelchairs, some are standing, some are holding crutches. So you can see the wide range of abilities in those photographs. So family actually stands for Physically Handicapped Amateur Musical Actors League. There is no word that corresponds to the Y. They just sort of tag that on the end. They are the longest running disability theater company in the country. They've been around for 36 years. They produce a full season of musicals and plays in Denver. And inside of the company, there is no hierarchy of disability. So you don't need to be visibly disabled. You don't have to necessarily even disclose your disability fully if you don't choose to. They are a very open, very welcoming organization. So what I want to share with you now are some thoughts on best practices. And I'm going to say at the top of this that I don't speak for disabled people. I am not disabled myself. What I'm sharing with you are things that I learned from working in disabled spaces and from talking to people with disabilities and performers with disabilities. And so my first thought is, when in doubt, ask. So if you're not sure how to accommodate someone's disability, the best way to find out is to ask them what they need. And that question might sound like, what do you need from me to provide you with the best experience? Know that not everyone will disclose their disability, and anyone can have an access need. So a little bit about access needs. This was a term that I was unfamiliar with. I think it came into my lexicon around 2020. I'm going to share with you a definition from the Autistic Advocacy Organization that I think is just really kind of really gets to the heart of what an access needs is. And it says, an access need is something a person needs to communicate, learn, and take part in an activity. Many people have access needs. My introduction to this term came through Nicole Brewer's anti-racist theater training. And she describes an access need as what a person needs to participate in order for learning to occur. So some general practices. Give a description of the class structure at the start. Tell folks what's going to happen so they can be prepared. I find that just one or two sentences at the top of a class telling people the structure of what's going to happen and the order and the sequencing really can help folks who might have some anxiety about things like that. And if someone needs to have a mobility device nearby, they can plan for that. So just giving people a heads up, this is what we're going to do right at the start can help them to prepare for whatever the event might be. I try to speak a little more slowly than usual. This has been a hard one for me, but I'm working on it. And finally, normalize rest. This is hard for us culturally, and I would say that's particularly true in the arts. It's one thing to say, if you need to sit down, you can do that. It's another thing to actually have chairs available and a place for people to sit down if they need to. So the idea of normalizing rest speaks to that second iteration of what I described, right? Having a space for people to actually sit down and take that pause if they need to. Something I took away from my time with Access Dance particularly was this idea of language and words. So this is really specific to dance training, I think, but the idea of functional needs instead of special needs. So just a slight change in language there can really shift how people receive what you're saying. Translation instead of modification. So the example I would use of that is if I walk into the dance studio and I've created a combination that I want to teach the class and I say, well, this is the choreography, but if you can't do it, you can modify it. If you're not able to do X, Y, Z, you can modify it. That implies a hierarchy in that I'm saying this is what it should be, But if you can't do that, you can go ahead and do something else. Whereas translation implies no hierarchy. If you think about language, when we translate from English to Spanish, it just goes from one side to the other, right? There's no emphasis on one being more important or more valuable than the other. And so this idea of translation instead of modification, I think, is a great language shift to make people feel more included. Saying limbs instead of arms and legs. And saying words like travel, move, or experience instead of walk, see, or hear. So some basic accommodations that you might want to consider. Again, asking is always helpful, but some thoughts. Taping the floor for orientation in the space. So this would be primarily to accommodate someone who was blind or had low vision. So tape on the floor, they can feel that under the soles of their feet, even if they're wearing shoes, if you use a thick tape. And that can help to orient somebody in a space to know where a boundary might be or where the front of the room might be. Using lights to cue. So for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, if I'm going to clap my hands to cue something, or I'm going to count to 3 and then we're going to shift to something else, well, for someone who can't hear my voice, that's not helpful. But I could just flicker the light and they would be able to see that. Using audio description, which is something I'm still working on and building that skill. Describing the movement as I do it in a way that someone who couldn't see it would be able to understand and comprehend. Using a visual or tactile representation of the beat, music, rhythm. And we're going to come back to that in a second because I'm going to show you an example of how we did that in Let's Dance. A few more thoughts on this. Using captioning, which I was happy to see there's captioning available for today's webinar. I feel like that's becoming more standard, but using captioning in the classroom is something we don't think about as often, especially in the dance studio. Having an ASL interpreter whenever possible. Sometimes that can be cost prohibitive, but if possible, it's always great to have, for any event, to have an ASL interpreter. Adjusting lighting. Folks can have sensitivity to fluorescent lighting, especially. So finding a way to maybe not dim the light, but filter the light can be helpful. And I've seen this more and more, providing a scent-free environment. So a lot of perfumes can cause migraines and discomfort. So providing a scent-free environment is another accommodation that you might consider. So I'm coming back to this slide because I want to point out a couple of things. You can see this the language that's behind me. So that's part of the captioning that we projected onto the back wall of the auditorium while I was teaching. So I wore a wireless mic. I used a free software that I downloaded from the internet called Ava, which is a captioning software that picked up what I was saying on mic and then transcribed it. And then we projected the captions on the wall behind me. So anyone who needed those captions were able to see them. Below the captioning, right behind my head, you can see those little lines. So that is another app that I downloaded for free from the internet called vSound, and it provides a visual representation of the music. So it pulses in time with the music, right? So really helpful for someone who can't hear the music, right? Or there aren't speakers where they can put their hands on it and feel it. That gives them a visual representation of the beat. So just some ways that we've been integrating these new ideas into the event that takes place on campus. Something else I would suggest is communicate in advance. Tell people what accommodations you will provide, that you can provide, so they know already that they're welcome. Because it's one thing to say all ages and all abilities, and it's another thing to really do the work to make that an actuality. So this is some language we used for our last Let's Dance event. An ASL interpreter captioning, wheelchair access to the stage, and inclusionary practices for neurodiverse participants will be provided. To discuss accommodations to help you flourish in this space, contact, and then the name of our contact was included there. We also had a registration form where people could disclose any access needs that maybe weren't covered by the accommodations that we had provided. So to conclude, I'm going to stop talking here. Remember, if you've met one, insert disability status here, person, you've met one, insert disability status here. So disabled people are not a monolith. When in doubt, ask what people need. And this is the first thing on my syllabus anymore. I feel this is so important. A lot of times we can be fearful of saying or doing the wrong thing, but meeting people where they are and remembering that we're all learning and unlearning at the same time is so important. And so this sentiment, do the best with what you know, and when you know better, do better, by Maya Angelou is, I think, just a wonderful quote to remind us of that. And then we're going to finish with, I love my quotes, James Brown. The one thing that can solve most of our problems is dancing. Yes to that is what I say. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I think we're going to do some questions.
All right, thanks, Michelle, for that presentation. We are going to go to some of the questions that were submitted either beforehand, or if you have a question and you're zooming in, you can ask it in the bottom of the Zoom video window there. Let me see here. First of all, so Laura would like to know, what advice do you have for someone who wants to open a dance school? And where's the best way to begin?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think start with maybe considering what kind of programming you want to offer. So I know there are some dance studios that offer an adaptive dance class that is specifically geared towards individuals with disabilities. Other folks are looking to include folks with disabilities in their ongoing classes. Those are a little bit different in terms of how you might navigate those different types of programming. But I would say, first, start by seeing if there's any disability service organizations in your community and start asking questions there. You want to make sure there's physical access to your space for folks that might use a wheelchair or some other type of mobility device. I'm glancing down because I took some notes about this. So ramps and doors, right? Making sure that people can get in and out of your space is sort of baseline. If it's a newer building, it should probably already be ADA compliant. So you probably won't have to worry too much about that. But you might also consider an intake survey from your students. Again, sourcing that information from them, asking them, what do you need? What can I do to provide you the best experience possible? That gives folks an opportunity to disclose a disability if they wish to, or ask, or just disclose an access need if they have one, and then you can provide that. But some of the basic accommodations that I mentioned, I think are good to have in your back pocket, if you will. So you know, okay, I have a roll of tape in the studio. I can put that out. And if I have someone who is maybe low vision, I have a way to provide that visual representation of the beat. I know I can provide that. I would also say if you can find, or if you have the resources, there are some really great training programs. The one at Access is wonderful. It does require that you go to California, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I understand that that might not be an option for everyone. There's another organization in Denver called Feel the Beat Dance that offers really excellent inclusive training for folks who want to do more of this work. So I would say you don't need training to start, but it would be great to get involved in your community first, and not assume that you know what people need.
So I have a question just out of curiosity, and this is from me. Um, Take us back to when you first made the decision to study dance academically, right? When you
Mhm.
majored in school, what was your initial outcome? Was it to be a performer, or was it to get into the kind of work that you're doing now, where it's dance to help others?
That's an excellent question. I was a performer first. I went to a conservatory program at Point Park University. Fantastic, great program, but really very hyper focused on performance, even I would say to the exclusion of choreography or pedagogy. And now I think that's changed a bit. Their curriculum has broadened, but I was in school a long time ago. And getting to this place of the work I'm doing now has been a really long journey for me. And it happened by accident. I was asked to do that Let's Dance event. I had never worked with anybody with a disability before. That's actually not true. We've had a couple of students come through the musical theater program at Penn State who had disabilities, but the sort of, how do I want to say this tactfully? They were encouraged, they had both been mainstreamed, the two students I'm thinking of, and so they came through an educational system that was asking them to present as able-bodied in order to work. And I think that was the prevalent attitude in their time here at Penn State as well. They're both wildly successful, and I loved working with them. But in terms of the work I'm doing now, that happened because I was invited to that Let's Dance event. And I was nervous when I found out that the For Good troupe was coming to perform, because I thought, I don't know how to do this. I've never worked with people with disabilities before. How will I know what to do? And it turned out to not be a big deal, because if you meet people where they are with an open heart and you just accept what they have to offer, the other stuff you can learn later, right? I think that the mindset and the openness to the experience has to be present first. But since then, my work has shifted more and more in that direction, and it's really kind of a central part of what I do now.
It's interesting that most of the times when we tap into our own kind of personal passions, it is by accident, right? It's being exposed to something that we didn't know that we were previously interested in. Do you remember the moment, or kind of the event where you said, I didn't realize I had this passion, and now it's something that's, I'm going to get more and more into, and it's going to drive my research and my academic interests.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of a slow burn. I think the success of that first Let's Dance was oh, I can do this. Okay. And then the class happened, and I just started to add more and more work in inclusion and access into my portfolio, if you will. So after teaching the class with Krista for a few semesters, she asked me to join the board of the Center Region Down Syndrome Society. So now I am an advocate, and I would provide service in that realm. I'm the choreographer for the For Good troupe, so I work with them on a regular basis. So when it came time, I guess maybe when it came time to make a decision about what I wanted to focus on in my sabbatical, and I thought, well, yeah, this is it. This is where my heart is, and this is where my work is now. That sort of solidified it.
So, I have a bunch of different directions that I want to go in. I want to talk a little bit about, my wife showed me something funny on of one of the videos she was watching. I remember when we were in elementary school, we took square dancing, right? And it kind of, the thing that she showed me, it says, I had this expectation that square dancing would be a bigger part of my life moving forward than it actually turned out to be, because it was part of our curriculum in elementary school. What is kind of your thoughts about making dance more part of other academic curriculums as we go through, right? I mean, last time I remember formally dancing, other than at my wedding, was in an elementary gymnasium. But why do you think that that isn't maintained throughout kind of our academic journeys?
Well, I think culturally, we don't have a lot of support for the arts in general in the US and compared to like a lot of European countries. Um, and as far as dance goes, when you think about the sort of mind-body split, right? I think therefore I am, where we sort of disavowed the body pretty much entirely. That still permeates our academic and educational spaces. I think we prioritize cognition and intellect to the detriment of the physical. And Eli Clare, who is a brilliant disability scholar and disabled person themselves, talks about what he calls mind body as all one thing, right? We are not, our mind is not separate from our bodies. And so when we start to include physical activity, even if it's as simple as breath work, right, into our academic spaces, there's a shift that happens, right? When we start to integrate and think more holistically about our space in the world and our ways of accomplishing tasks or success, it shifts the result. And then it starts to raise the profile and we start to understand and value dance and movement in a different way. But it often feels like we have to sort of prove it scientifically first in order for people to say, oh, sure, yeah, that's valuable. And I think that dance is valuable even if science doesn't say so, although it does.
Um, I think about, again, a personal kind of self-interest question, right? I had no interest in dance growing up, right? And really very little interest. I had other interests, right? And then a show came on television called Dancing with the Stars, right?
Mm.
Which made dancing, from an accessibility standpoint, someone who wasn't interested, it made it more accessible to me, right? To see celebrities, to see basketball players, to see Olympians performing in that. What impact do you think programs like that have had on how Americans look at dance now?
I'm actually so glad that you brought that up because I think access can mean a lot of things, right? Access can actually mean there's no dance studio in my hometown, or I've never had the opportunity to see a dance performance, right? So, access can mean the ramp to get into the building, but it can also mean what is available to you in wherever you happen to be in this moment. So, I think shows like Dancing with the Stars, So You Think You Can Dance, like having dance on TV. I mean, I grew up with Solid Gold and then the Fly Girls in, oh gosh, what was that show? I can't, oh,
Um,
In Living Color, that's what it was.
yeah, I
Anyway,
feel like we're the same generation, so you're kind of
perhaps, yeah. Anyway, there's always been dance on television though, right? When I teach, I'm showing clips from Ed Sullivan and, all those variety shows from the 60s and 70s. So, I think the popularity of those shows demonstrate that there's appetite for dance and that there are a lot of people in this country that want to watch it. Maybe not participate. I think there's still a little bit of well, that's nice, but I can't do that. And
right.
I would argue that everybody can dance. Do they choose to? Is there access provided and a space provided where they feel that they can do it and feel okay about doing it? And so as I've been out on this, what I call my laureate tour, I've been doing a lot of these Let's Dance events, and I have administrators, I've had chancellors, and people start moving within 10 minutes, everyone's smiling, everyone's laughing. The whole energy in the room changes. And, these are not folks who would describe themselves as dancers, right? Or necessarily think that they're going to go and take a dance class. So the impact is there, but sometimes crossing that threshold, getting in the room is the hardest part.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable how dance has an impact on the room. So we do pep rallies at football
Mhm.
games, at away football games, and we incorporate dance at each one of those. We have a member of the band come up front and they teach one of their band dances, and so they have everybody stand up and
Mhm.
all together, and the spirit in and the energy at those pep rallies completely changes after that. I mean, people they're up, they're moving, they feel like they're part of it.
Yep.
So yeah, it definitely has an impact. Speaking of your laureate tour,
Mhm.
previous Penn State laureates spoke at Penn State Commonwealth campuses. Will you have such a tour, and kind of when are your next tour stops, and how do people find where you're going to be?
Yeah, so I guess I've completed about half of the tour so far. So I started off, I went to Altoona. I've been geographically organizing my tour. So I went to Altoona, Beaver, Shenango, Erie, up in September because I thought I'm not going to Erie in the winter, period. Um, and then I was in Du Bois just for sort of a day trip. Then I did a trip around Pittsburgh to Greater Allegheny and Fayette to the Eberly campus. I've been to Abington. Now I will go in January. I'll be in Harrisburg, York, and back to Altoona. They're close, so they get a double dose of me. Also, they have a dance minor program there, so there's a little bit more overlap. Although I've been doing workshops with nursing students and I mean, all wide ranges of populations, which I love. Um, yeah, so February is Harrisburg, York, Altoona. March, I will be out in the Philly area going to Brandywine, Lehigh Valley, Great Valley. And then where do I go after that? Oh, in April, once the snow is hopefully gone, I'll go out to the Poconos and I'll go to like Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and Hazleton campuses. So I'm hitting almost everyone who asked for a laureate visit is getting one, and some campuses, whatever, they didn't, and that's okay.
If people wanna come see you at one of these stops, is there a schedule? How do they find out when these events are happening?
Yeah, we usually do, the promotion happens at the Commonwealth campus level, and then we sort of support it and blast it out again through the College of Arts and Architecture here at University Park. So if you're in the Penn State news system already, you should be seeing those blasts that way. That's where they come out. And then I tend to share things on social media. So if people follow me on social media, you can see it there. Yeah, that's the best way to find out.
Well, for those of you who are zoomed in and interested in catching one of Michelle's tour stops, we're going to put her contact information. We'll put her social media information in all of the follow-up communications from today's session. One final question coming in from an attendee. They write, I am a counselor interested in dance as a modality. Do you encounter counselors and social workers in the work that you're doing?
To some degree, and so I just want to clarify that I'm not a dance therapist, but we do read some dance therapy studies in that course that I was describing, the CSD 240 course. Um, in the camp Yes and is probably the place that I encountered the most folks from the what I would say called the allied health professions. But even in that instance, it was really more occupational therapy, speech language pathology. I haven't worked with or encountered a lot of counselors in my experience, but I absolutely believe that dance would be transformative in a counseling setting. That and dance and improvisation, and also dance improvisation, right? So those two things separately, but also I think those two modalities together can be a really powerful tool for unlocking and self-expression.
Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank Professor Dunleavy for joining us, and I also want to thank all of you who tuned in for today's virtual speaker session. As a reminder, you can find all of our events online and in person at our website at alumni.psu.edu/events. For those of you who are members of the Alumni Association, thank you, thank you, thank you for your support. And if you're not yet a member, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thank you for tuning in and for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are
Penn State.